Well, good morning, folks. It's Sunday morning. It doesn't feel like a Sunday morning because I'm recording this on a Saturday afternoon. I'll go live for the same message in the morning. But life's a lot different nowadays, at least for the next couple of weeks. We had talked about possibly being back on April 5th, with governor's orders at least being kind of pinned down until April 7th. Maybe Easter Sunday, we're hoping for that. We're going to be preaching through the book of Hebrews still, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 through 11 today. I want to talk about why we despise discipline. One of those adult words that even teenagers and kids don't like from time to time. Hebrews chapter 2 verses 4 to 11 says this: "You have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? But if you're without discipline, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Furthermore, we had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. Shall we not much rather be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they discipline us for a short time as seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share in his holiness. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful, but sorrowful. Yet to those who have been trained by it, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness." I want to look at a few synonyms for the word discipline. Those are words like control, regulation, restraint, self-control, development, or training. Those are some pretty strong words when it comes to that type of word, discipline, that we're dealing with today in the text. And typically when we hear that word discipline, we think of certain areas like athletes. As of right now, the summer games and the Olympics have been pushed back. So I think about all the discipline that those athletes put in for weeks, months, years even, and now it seemingly is for nothing. So they'll keep training for the next Olympics or the next marathon or the next whatever they have to do. You think about the discipline of a runner trying to shave 1/100th of a second or another half second off of his sprint or his run. Think about writers and academics. The discipline of writing. I just finished the book, and it took me several months to finish and edit and type and get done and get in. And still waiting to hear what the results are from the publisher. But it took a lot of discipline on my part, hours per day, where sometimes I only got a page done per day, but I had to do it. I had to just get down to the nitty-gritty and focus and get it done. What about your finances? We have to be disciplined in our finances. And one of the probably in the church world, we hear the word discipline in accordance with our spiritual life, or our walk with the Lord, or spirituality. But it has a whole lot of different aspects to it in the world. But in our lives, and this is who Jesus is speaking to us here in this passage, it's very, very important. We know that losing recess, if you're a kid, is a discipline. Or maybe you might have got put into detention for misbehaving in class. Well, that is a discipline. You might have been suspended from a classroom situation, and that becomes a difficult thing. But it's discipline. You might have even had a speeding ticket because you did not listen to the law, chose to live on your own, speed as fast as you wanted to go, and not pay attention to what the law said. And that was a discipline. Maybe in the past you've been fired from a job because you weren't keeping up and doing what you were supposed to do on that job. Well, that was discipline. Or getting caught cheating, maybe missing a curfew, or even, we've got 2 miniature schnauzers. We've had them now for almost a year, and they did not come pre-trained. They did not come pre-disciplined. We had to teach them what they could chew on and not chew on. We had to teach them when to go to the bathroom and where to go to the bathroom. And we cage trained them at first, so they knew that an animal will not use the bathroom in its own cage, and so we trained them that way, and then took them out first thing. And now they're doing really, really great. No problems, no issues. From time to time you'll have a mess, but we had to discipline the animals to do what we expected them to do. So these principles from God's Word today are especially for us, because He's speaking right to us. So first of all, these believers were suffering persecution, but they weren't being martyred. They weren't being killed. So their biggest test at that time was fighting the sin that so easily besets them, which we read about first in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Remember, there's a great cloud of witnesses, and not to be so easily beset by the sin that entangles us. So he says, look, you're not dying yet. Nobody's killing you. Nobody's putting a sword to your head. Nobody's trying to kill your family. So the biggest things you got to fight are the temptations that will make you lazy, the temptations that will shipwreck and sidetrack and derail your spiritual walk with the Lord. So he tries to get them to understand, look, all these things that are happening, it is an aspect of discipline, not as hard as it could be. So be thankful this is all you've got to deal with right now. They hadn't shed blood, but yet Christ had. And looking back earlier in Hebrews chapter 12, as I preached from last week, he endured the cross, despising the shame. So they've not yet shed blood, but Christ endured all that he faced, all he dealt with on the cross itself. And the way these verses are kind of listed, he says, my son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord. It has like a Proverbs approach to it. If you read the book of Proverbs, the first 7 chapters especially, it deals with wisdom. And often the writer will say, now my son, pay attention to this. Remember this aspect of life. So he's talking to us because God considers us his children. We're his sons and his daughters, and he views us as his. I'm proud of my kids, and I'm sure that God is proud of us in the sense that we belong to him. We've surrendered our lives to him and live our lives for Christ in that regards. But without providing or expecting discipline, there's no way God could be our father figure. I could not have the kids that I have if we had not put down rules, if we had not spanked them. And yes, we did spank my kids. All 3 of my kids were spanked from time to time because we wanted to do what we needed to do to make sure they listened and they understood and respected us, not because we were the parents, but because we saw what needed to be disciplined out of them in that regards. So the term scourge, he says he scourges every son he receives. Well, that was a common childbearing term, child-rearing term in that day and age. It meant training and correction. It was what was expected for parents to do. Now, we've all been in Walmart before and seen that situation where somebody had never disciplined that kid before in their entire life. And they wanted something on the shelf, and a mom or a dad that had no clue what they were doing because they were busy on their phone or something else, just letting that kid wail, you can't have that, you can't have this. Well, why? And you see arguments in Walmart and the stores all the time because parents didn't discipline their kids. I don't know about you, but I always got that my mom had a certain look. I know my wife has a certain look for my kids. I'm sure that God has a certain look that he gives us. Why? Because we're his kids, and he cares about what we're doing. And we can look at a face and read the facial cues and understand, all right, the person looking at me is not real happy right now, and we ought to take some incentive for that and figure out that we need to stop doing what we're doing or try to figure out what we're doing that's wrong to begin with. But here, scourges every son he receives. It's about endurance. It's about staying the course. God disciplines us so that we will stay the course, keep carrying the cross, keep living our lives for him, and not be just shoved aside by every situation that we face, every difficult circumstance that we deal with. The Father disciplines us so that we will still be standing for him on the last day of our lives. I believe wholeheartedly we're living in the days of the great falling away and the love of many growing cold. It's not just church attendance figures that we can look at to suggest that. We can see the culture, the world in which we live. The number of churches that have solely incredibly compromised their positions on alternative lifestyles and same-sex marriage and things of that nature. We see all sorts of things going on in that regard, and we think, how in the world that church, those leaders, those pastors, those people should know what the Word of God says. But obviously, they've walked away from the Word of God. It doesn't mean as much as it used to anymore, and they're going to do what they want to do. So God disciplines us so that we'll still be standing for him, still serving him, still living our lives for him along the way. And these tests also prove our sonship. And sometimes we have to set our face like flint, just like Jesus did on the way to Jerusalem when he set his face like flint, knowing what was there. We have to set our faces like flint because that response is what's going to be necessary, especially when it gets hard, especially when persecution comes and opposition comes and mockery and ridicule comes against the believer. You see, parents discipline us to prepare us for life itself. I'm thankful for the messages that my mom and my dad tried to teach me. Now look, I never got paddled, and I should have been paddled probably 150 times a day up until the time I was 15 when I got saved. I've got a lot of stories, some crazy things that happened. But I'm thankful. I remember one time I was in a situation, and my dad, the next morning I got up, was waiting in his chair and said, "Sit down, Dana." And one of the few times I actually remember, my dad really unloaded on me and gave me both barrels. And really for just once or twice in his life was like, "What were you doing? What's wrong with you?" I remember him saying that to me. And although it was kind of a stunning moment, my dad never taught me like that, so I'd done something pretty bad, as you can imagine. But I understood the point he was trying to make was I had put myself into a possible legal situation where someone could have really gotten hurt, and I was one responsible for that. So my parents discipline us so that we will prepare ourselves for life and their stories, their experience, their struggles, their victories and their challenges. Those things help us here. They help us to know how to live, how to behave. My dad helped me sit down and learn how to do taxes from the time I was 16. And that's something I've not done as well with my kids. But I remember him teaching me the thing and telling me why this was important and all the paperwork and all the situations and why he had somebody look it over. And so I would do my tax and he would check it and say, "Oh no, you did this wrong. You do this again." And so I got better at it. But parenting also has an eternal aspect. Parents don't just raise us to live how we want, do what we want, and then end up wherever we might end up. They prepare us spiritually, especially those parents that are Christians and believers and understand that there's something more than just life on this side. You see, our parents are part of that team of great cloud of witnesses. They help shape us. They prepare us for the life that we'll live in this world for Christ. And one day when our parents passed away, my dad passed away in the year 2000. And I can't wait to see him again. I can't wait to see my grandma again. I've got uncles, I've got cousins, I've got family members that are there. I've got a sister that's there now. I've not seen them for a long time, and I can't wait. Part of the reason they raise us right here is so that we'll make that same leap when we take our last breath, because we've got a life to live. And God disciplines us, and His disciplines are beneficial for perseverance and endurance. And Christ modeled that for us on the cross. The reason He went to the cross, endured the cross and despising the shame, He carried it, He hung on it, He died on it, He endured all those things so that we could have the life that we need to have, the example that we need to have, the understanding that we need to have, the people that cloud of witnesses around us that invest in us and pour into us because they too want to see us on the other side. I did a funeral many years ago for an older gentleman. And one of the last things he said, had been in the nursing home, had gone through some therapy, had a couple of heart attacks and strokes, which is not doing very well. And his wife called and she said, "Pastor, would you just come and just see him? This is probably going to be the last time. Would you come?" And so I went, and myself and this man, we talked for about probably a couple hours that day, just about life. And he shared some of the hardships he'd faced. He shared some of the most difficult learning experiences he had ever had in his life. I cherish those moments. And I went to shake his hand and pray for him. And after I started to walk away, he held onto my hand and he said, "Pastor Dana, I'll be looking for you up there." I started bawling. Because I knew he was saying, "I'm not too long for this world, but I'll see you there." And he was looking forward to seeing me there. So his investment in my life, even though I was his pastor, he poured back into my life as well. So those disciplines are good. And God's discipline is always for our good because it builds character and transparency as He prepares us to live for Him in a very hostile and condemning world. This world is not an easy place to live in. It's chaos. Right now, in spite of the coronavirus outbreak, the pandemic, you've got businesses shut down. You've got people that don't know where the next dollar is going to come from. Unemployment websites that are crashing because so many people are trying to get benefits and things. You got people who are just nervous. As I said last week, I'll say it again. I've talked to several folks on the phone this week. I've had several counseling sessions because people are home with their kids and they're struggling. They're frustrated because there's all this noise and activity and action going on. And this it's not like a summer break. There's an unknown X factor in this because nobody knows when this will end or stop. So we can even look at this situation now. It's changing the way the church does its business. It's changing the way that we reach people. It puts us more out there on the pulpit of Facebook or on YouTube. So it's changing us. So what are some last thoughts we can really get from this passage? Well, first of all, the early church never ran from persecution. They stayed true to the call. They never denied Christ. They never said, no, we didn't know who he was. Now, Peter did that, but Peter was crucified upside down on a cross because he did not want to be crucified the same way that Christ was, out of honor and respect for him. But they killed him. They murdered him on a cross. Why? Because he would not deny the faith. Paul was beheaded because he would not stop preaching the gospel, would not stop writing the gospel, the epistles and the letters as well. So, look, you may not be in the job that you want to be in right now, and God's told you you need to stay here. Because there may be a worker that needs to see your witness and your character and your patience that you can't see. I had a job when I was in high school. I had a boss that was just drove me nuts. His language was horrible. His attitude was almost at times satanic. Matter of fact, he was just a hard guy to work for. And I prayed numerous times, Lord, please let me get another job. And I, as a 15, 16, I heard God say, I want you there. And I did not want to be there. But God, through that job, opened up a door for a different job about 6 months later. And I understood why I was at that first place to begin with. I was there to make a difference, to be a witness. So that's where we are. I got pastor friends out there right now that you're not seeing all you hope for at your church. He might be disciplining a quitter spirit out of you. You know, sometimes we discipline things in, like that athlete may be trying to get a faster speed or a longer jump, but sometimes God disciplines us to move stuff out of our lives, out of our habits, out of our resources. He may be putting us in places to stretch us, to teach us to endure for things that are coming down the pike. So, pastor friends, you know, the places I've been, every place I've been, I have followed a moral failure. It's not been easy. And you also deal with the stuff in the community. One church I pastored has a name in the community, had a name in the community. And everybody remembers that situation, that thing that happened years ago. But God's not going to just make that go away. So my pastor friends out there might be watching this. Look, don't quit. Let God discipline the quit out of you. Just keep praying, keep trusting. Keep believing that God can and will do the things He's called you there to do. You're not always going to see success everywhere you go like we judge success. Matter of fact, I'm sure there's plenty of rural pastors, pastoring church of 100 or less, that are not seeing the things that they want to see, the great revivals they've dreamed of. But you know what? God's got you there for a reason. So stay there. Stay there. Stay there. I have pastored in Jasonville, I have pastored in Sealyville, and I have pastored in Burkesville. All communities of less than 2,000. I've never pastored a church larger than 175, 180. But you know what? That's what God's called me to do. I'm thankful I've got friends that are geared towards those other size churches. This is what God's called me to do. And so whatever God's called you to do, wherever He's called you to serve and to be, stay there and do what God's called you to do. Even if it's hard, be disciplined. And realize that discipline may be His discipline on you to make you a better person, a better pastor, even a better listener. See, we forget sometimes that discipline does bring things out of our lives as well. It works things out of us. When we first got to Burkesville, I think we've been here about a year and a half, I got really, really sick. Had gone off the insulin pump that I was on, was having a lot of trouble regulating, and got into a very, very serious high glucose level situation. Went to DKA, am in the hospital. And I was out of it for probably 2 or 3 days. I was over 1,000 a couple times, and just not feeling well. And anyone who has type 1 diabetes understands what I'm saying. Anyway, at the end of that 3 or 4 days, I realized I had not bitten my nails. Now look, I had bitten my nails since I was 3 years old. That's what my mom told me many years ago. And I always got a lot of nervous energy, need to be moving around. It's hard for me to stay in one place, but I know I have to because there's a camera right there. On Sundays, my Fitbit always goes off while I'm preaching, because that means I've hit my steps for the day, my 15,000 steps for the day, usually before 11:30 when I start preaching. So I like to move. But I realized the sickness part that happened during that week was to help me not bite my nails anymore. And I can tell you, I've not bitten my nails since that moment. It took discipline beyond that, but that was a good thing that came out of it. So realize that God works in mysterious ways, and sometimes through the hard things will shape things out of you. We'll move things out of you that don't need to be part of your life. And every good father does that for us, so don't despise those hard times. Don't ever put your fist in God. It's okay to say, God, why? But don't ever put your fist in God's face and say, what are you doing? Because you don't do that to your dad. You don't treat your father like that, especially when he's trying to give you wisdom and understanding to help you in the situation that you are in at that time. So don't despise the sacrificial times, or even the confusing times, or even the wonderful times, or the wearying times. He never leaves our side. He is right there beside us through every test, through every situation, through every circumstance, through every difficulty. He's right there. I had a professor at CBC, Dr. Piercy, and there had been a planned bonfire towards the first of the semester down near the pond at CBC. And a bunch of us were all sitting down there on blankets getting ready for the bonfire. And I remember looking up. It was almost one of those moments where God says, I need you to see something. And so I looked up. And I saw Dr. Piercy walking down this like a slight hill road, like a driveway. It was all downhill, slanted slightly. And he was walking with his son right beside him. And there was one of those commercial dumpsters with the arms, the wings on it, where the thing comes in, grabs it, and pulls it up and empties the dumpster. And I was watching, and the little boy, he's just kind of messing, he's got energy, he's looking around, he's jumped probably 4 or 5, maybe even smaller than that, years old, he's just not paying attention to what's going on around him, his surroundings. And they're getting closer and closer to this dumpster. And I watched as Dr. Piercy just took his hand, put it on the back of the son's head, and just kind of steered him out of the way and over. And that kid had no idea what his dad had just done for him. His dad had saved his head from a huge knot, and probably some bloodshed, and the kid had no idea what happened. I can close my eyes, I can still see that to this day. It was one of those things that God wanted me to see. And how many times does God get us out of the way of things that we have no idea that the danger was even there? And sometimes the discipline is very obvious, and sometimes the discipline makes no sense at all. But God does this a whole lot more often in our lives than we can imagine. And so while we're sometimes complaining about our circumstances or our job or our boss or what's not happening in our churches or what's not going on in this part of town or what's not happening with the economy or what about me, or one word I hate to hear somebody use the word fair. God does not care about the word fair. The word he chooses is just. And anything he does, anything he allows, anything he tempers in our lives is just. So don't despise the discipline. Don't despise the hard times, the hard situations, the difficulties, the challenges. Even when you are so weary you can't walk from time to time. He's there. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son he receives. I will take it that he is my father. And my father has the right to look at my life, my decisions, and say, you need to think about this. I will respect it when my father says, I don't want you to do this. I will respect it when my father says, run with this decision. I will respect it when God says, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, son. Well done, daughter. That's what I want to hear. That's what I want you to hear as well. So let's pray and ask the Lord to help us in those times. Father, I ask for those that are listening, those that are watching, that may be in difficult situations right now, difficult frustrations, moments where they are just not liking where they are. I'm going to ask you to give them peace and comfort, but more than that, help them understand that this is to develop character and transparency in their lives. And I ask you to shape every one of us. Lord, we're still going through these stay-in-place type orders and things around the nation. The financial conditions are worrying. But God, I want to put my faith and my trust in you. Help us all to do that and just to believe that you are above and beyond all those things that we're facing and we're dealing with. Lord, you're bigger. So help us to be bigger for you too. We pray it in Jesus' name. Thanks again for stopping in for this, folks. I'll be back on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 10 o'clock every morning with a 15-20-minute devotion. And I will also be working by Wednesday to have some things going for a series on the book of Revelation. So thanks a lot. Bye. God bless.